to what was saying leading up to that reversal. Watch some of this.
The best information and the best assessment we have today is that, in fact, this was not a pre-planned, premeditated attack. That what happened initially was that it was a spontaneous reaction to what had just transpired in Cairo as a consequence of the video.
We saw no evidence to back up claims by others that this was a pre-planned or premeditated attack. That we saw evidence that it was sparked by the reaction to this video.
Outside of that compound in Benghazi, you can see RPGs in this video. Just a few people are out there in the street, and it's believed that these may be the actual perpetrators, the people who went in there and killed Chris Stevens and the IT professional and our 2 former Navy SEALs in that brutal attack. And there's a picture of the 4 of them now, because it all really goes back to them in terms of what happened and what we've been told. Mary Catherine, what's your interpretation of what the White House has sort of evolved in their thinking and all this week?
Well, I feel like there's a grim joke in here about things becoming self-evident to the White House that were self-evident to the rest of us 9 days ago. I think most people said, well, it's 9/11. It's probably not just a YouTube video. And by the way, when you blame it on just a YouTube video, you get in a situation where the White House is asking YouTube or pressuring YouTube to review its terms of use and maybe take that down, which Google and YouTube have not been willing to do, which I think is a dangerous situation just for freedom of speech issues. But, I mean, I think the American people want to know that they can sing from the same hymn book, that they actually know what happened last week. And I think the president, in his 6 minutes of rambling, when he was asked about why there wasn't enough security yesterday, he didn't answer those questions. And I think that's what people want to know. Has enough been done to make sure this doesn't happen again? This is a very big deal. The first ambassador killed in line of duty since 1979. And I don't feel like we're getting to the bottom of exactly what happened. There was reporting of threats before this happened, of Al-Qaeda threats. There was reporting of perhaps this being premeditated. And it feels like newspaper reporters and reporters in general are ahead of the White House. I don't want to feel that way.
Now, 4 Americans died there, including U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens. And just about any way you look at it, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, says there needs to be a thorough investigation.
I think people need to know what exactly happened, because there was a massive failure here. You can't have 4 dead Americans and not attribute it to failure.
Now, none of this seems to jibe with what the administration has been saying in the wake of the attacks. This was, they say, just a demonstration over an anti-Muslim film made here in the U.S. that escalated and got way out of control. But that may be contradicted by what we heard yesterday from the head of the nation's counterterrorism center when he testified on Capitol Hill.
Let me begin by asking you whether you would say that Ambassador Stevens and the 3 other Americans died as a result of a terrorist attack.
Certainly on that particular question, I would say yes. They were killed in the course of a terrorist attack on our embassy.
Now, that would seem to imply that there was some kind of planning involved, but the White House yesterday was sticking to its take on this, that this was not a premeditated attack, at least by the evidence they've seen so far. Steve?
Your comments then. KT, is there a crack in the story now that we're seeing?
Yeah, there sure is. And why are they doing it? I think they're haunted by the image of Jimmy Carter losing the presidential election in 1980 because of hostages in the Middle East. And, you know, the situation is very similar today. The economy is lousy, high oil prices, crisis in the Middle East, and so they don't want to be compared to that. I also think that they're sticking to this kind of cockamamie story that it was spontaneous and that it was all because of a dumb movie, because it absolves them of responsibility.
How so?
Well, I think there are going to be more incidents going forward. And can you imagine where we would be today if instead of assassinating those 4 diplomats, it turns out that there was an Al-Qaeda hostage-taking event where you had 4 American diplomats on their knees, blindfolded, with, you know, scimitar-yielding terrorists standing behind them? We would have a very different conversation today, and I think that's what the administration politically is worried about.
All right, Steve, what about this? Is there a crack in the story?
Yeah, I think there is. And Bill, we talked about this on Monday, as you point out. Remember, when you go back and you look at how the administration has talked publicly about previous attacks or attempted attacks, this is the pattern. You see from the administration an effort to get out in front of the story and to downplay it almost immediately. This happened both with the Christmas bomber, the Christmas Day bomber in Detroit, where they said he was an isolated extremist. This happened after the New York Times Square bombing attempt, where they said this was a one-off attempt. This is the way the administration handles these efforts. They get out in front and they downplay or dismiss the significance of it. And they've been making an argument, a political argument now for several months, and most heavily, I would say, at the Democratic Convention, that al-Qaeda had been in effect defeated, that the demise of Osama bin Laden meant the demise of al-Qaeda, the group. And this suggests, given the ties to al-Qaeda groups and al-Qaeda-like sympathizers, that maybe they were premature in making those declarations.
Well, you're making the
saying the horrific attack on Americans at Benghazi was the work of terrorists. Rick Leventhal, live in Jerusalem with more. Rick, they seem to be the last to the party. Most everybody else, other networks and other investigators, have thought about this all along.
Well, Brian, from the very beginning, there were questions about what really happened at the U.S. Consulate in Libya, since most protesters don't carry RPGs and automatic weapons. And the attack on the compound on the anniversary of 9/11 appeared well coordinated, carried out by a large group of heavily armed men. The violent assault leaving 4 dead, including Ambassador Chris Stevens. Well, initially, White House spokesman Jay Carney said the assault was sparked by anger over an anti-Muslim video, a protest that turned ugly. And then on Wednesday, he adjusted his position. Well, yesterday, on board Air Force One, Jay Carney tried to clear up any confusion. He said, quote, "It is, I think, self-evident that what happened in Benghazi was a terrorist attack. Our embassy was attacked violently, and the result was 4 deaths of American officials. So again, that's self-evident." That was Jake.
Point something out, though. A lot of the reason why it was the movie, and it has been the movie, is because a couple of weeks ago at the DNC, at the convention down there, Joe Biden said it. I'm not sure if President Obama said it or not, but it was uttered quite a few times. Osama bin Laden is dead and GM is alive. A lot of this protest is, at least what we're reading, is in response to the victory lap that the administration's taking for killing bin Laden. So if you attach it to terrorism, if you attach it to a pre-planned attack, then it heads back to the White House. If you blame a movie, it shields them from any responsibility for diplomats.
I just never thought we'd be arguing on this level. I thought perpetrators and who was responsible is where we're usually going now, rather than talking about was it terror. By the way, it's amazing, too. It wasn't self-evident on Wednesday, but on Thursday, it's self-evident.